Welcome to the Red Chair. Today we have Dr. Stephen Waterhouse. Stephen, great to see you.
See
Welcome
you,
to Indico.
Thank you.
You're a regular visitor and investor in us and co-investor with us.
Indeed.
Great to see you here in Lisbon, in Portugal. You'll tell us all about that in a little while, but tell me, where were you born? How did it all start? How did you get into tech and into investing?
Okay, right from the beginning. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm from the UK originally, and I lived in various places in Newcastle originally, and then Bishop Stortford, which is very close to Cambridge, where I went on to do my undergraduate, master's, and PhD. I focused on this strange research topic called neural networks. And
Back in the day.
Yeah, in 1993. And our application was speech recognition. So we were working on the large vocabulary speech recognition, which was just like the hardest task at the time in AI. We didn't call it AI back then. AI was actually something different, but now we're going to call these things AI. And that was all the same. After I graduated, I moved to San Francisco and started working as a consultant, a contractor for NASA originally. Spent the first 3 years in the States doing that. And at the same time, really just ran around Silicon Valley in the late 90s trying to understand what venture capital was, what startups were, how you built these things.
These were glory days.
Yeah, who did what? I was very confused and very naive. Originally, idealistic PhD student, and after a couple of years became definitely Silicon Valley entrepreneur capitalist type. So that experience then led me to joining a startup just in the kind of ashes of the dot-com bust that was focusing on peer-to-peer search technologies, funded by some guy called Mark Andreessen that I guess I knew from Netscape. He was one of the angel investors. We could not raise venture funding. The VC winter after the dot-com bust was unbelievable. Like it's nothing you've ever seen before.
Nuclear winter.
It was just like, forget about doing anything. So we ended up selling out to Sun Microsystems. And then at Sun, I worked with Bill Joy, one of the co-founders, Mike Clary, who were part of the Java team, and got to build out originally a bunch of work on peer-to-peer technologies, kind of the precursor to a lot of things we do in crypto today. And then subsequently built out commodity storage, hardware, and various different kind of products there.
Which year was this?
The early 2000s. I left in 2004. From 2004 till about 2012, I guess 2005 to about 2012, did a lot of different things. Tried a bunch of different startups, incubated a bunch of ideas, started angel investing. And then I also started advising and consulting in intellectual property, which was a bit of a career diversion for me at the time. But it was fascinating because we were looking at patents from everybody. We were like analyzing and trying to figure out how much they were worth. I had to learn intellectual property law. I had to learn how to write patents. I got to look at every single technology sector. And over that period of time, we realized that the people who were starting to buy and sell these patents were becoming part of what became a very serious problem in the industry from patent trolling. So people would buy patents and then assert them against larger companies. So myself and some friends started a company called RPX in 2008. It's a great year to start a company. Yeah, August was actually our Series A from Kleiner Perkins. We did one of the largest Series A's at that point, 25 million Series A from CRV and Kleiner. And 3 years later, all our clients included basically all the top tech companies in the world. And what we would do is provide a service where we would clear the patents from the market. So we'd either go buy them before they became problems, or we would go and break litigations. So we were able to go public on NASDAQ in 3 years. On the back of that, I started a venture debt fund, which got acquired by Fortress Investment Group. And then at Fortress, I did the equation and said, okay, hedge fund plus patents equals probably a patent troll. So I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I think I'm out. So I went to Pete Brigger, the guy who runs Fortress, and Mike Novogratz, and I said to Pete, hey, I think I want to do something else. I'll see you guys later. It's like, yeah, don't leave yet. Why don't you come up with another idea? So I went away for a month and talked to some friends and carried on working on the IP fund. And then one of my friends, Sean O'Connor, who's a very early investor crack and on the board, he said, have you tried Bitcoin? And I was like, yeah, I've read about that in Wired, and some friends were mining it, but like, it's just like DigiCash, right? I mean, is this thing working? He goes, no, it's better. It's better than DigiCash, because we'd all been looking at payment systems for a while, and e-gold and all these things. And it just felt like it was yet another one of these. And so I looked harder into it. I was like, this is great. Went back
to 2012?
13, February 13. And so I went back to Pete and Mike, and I was like, hey, we should do some Bitcoin stuff. They said, yeah, too late. We're already buying Bitcoin. I was like, oh, yeah, but what about investing in companies around Bitcoin, like the exchanges and the wallets or something? He goes, oh, that's a cool idea. So a few months later, he brought this guy in, Dan Moorhead, who was his roommate at Princeton. And Dan had this very successful global macro fund called Pantera. And then a few months later, we essentially spun the team out of Fortress and restarted Pantera to focus on digital assets. So I was an early partner there for the first 3 years. I was on the board of actually a European exchange called Bitstamp, which was the first globally licensed, or licensed by Global Institute, by the European Union. We invested in a lot of very early things, Zcash, Brave, Circle, Bitstamp, lots of local exchanges. I left in 2016, just as we were starting to do work in more like blockchain-oriented investments, not just Bitcoin exchanges, etc. I really wanted to go start something. I really was like, this has been really fun to do venture for a while, but I think I want to do another startup. So I went off and tried to figure out what was a hard problem to solve, and had no idea what to do for 9 months. And then finally, I figured out, just through a bunch of experiences, that this idea of doing a decentralized VPN architecture, essentially like building something like an onion router, but with crypto incentives, might be a good idea. Put a really great team together, including Jay Freeman, who built out the jailbreak framework for the iPhone, Cydia. He's still my CTO and co-founder. So we started this company called Orchid in 2017. We were one of the first tokenized projects, the SE20 tokenized projects. Raised money from Sequoia A16, Naval, FBG, Polychain, many people, Steve Jobson, many like great investors in the first round. Raised more money the year after.
Then the heyday of ICOs.
Yeah, 2017, 18. We didn't do an ICO. We did what's called a SAFT, which is sort of a more regulated version of ICO, essentially a private round. ICOs started off legal and ended up illegal very, very rapidly. This was sort of the era of the SEC really starting to flex its muscles and figure out how to quite nicely initially come after the industry, and then later that changed. We tried to do everything by the book. We launched in 2019, so fairly fast, but we went through a whole crypto winter cycle during that period. Launched just ahead of COVID, and then just after we launched, a few months later, COVID hit. So that was interesting. And then initially the markets just collapsed, and then later, as the Fed started printing money, things went up, and that also coincided with us getting a lot more users and releasing products and so on. So we did very well in that cycle. At about the same time in 2020, I decided to move from San Francisco, where I lived for 25 years, to Lisbon.
Yes, and we met.
We met, yes, very early on. And I think your first, the first advice you get to me was like, you should invest in one of the funds here first before you go and try and start your own fund. So I have invested in one of your funds, and then also started one of my own funds. And then you've been very kind in like helping me understand the ecosystem, and also my son's actually worked for you as an intern last year, which was great. His first job. There were various reasons for moving, and I can get into that later if you like. But the kind of career move, I carried on running Orchid, but then I also started working with angel investing, and also working with Fabric Ventures. My friend Richard, I've known since Cambridge days. So I joined them as a venture partner and began investing in DeFi and NFTs and a lot of the stuff that was happening in 2021 through 2022. So it was a very exciting period too. Did various things that worked out very nicely on the angel side, and also incubated a project with my fiance now, Christina, called Squid, which is a cross-chain router, looking to launch this year as well. So did various kind of startup-like things, but also investing things. Thought about retiring and got bored very quickly after a few weeks, so I decided not to do that, even though my surfing game got a bit better. And then when the AI chatbots started becoming much more visible and like much more intelligent, I guess, I got my interest piqued very, very hard by this, and thought initially about starting a fund focusing on AI, and then decided not to do it. And then a few months later, decided to do it, and kind of went back and forth through this process. And then finally, about a year and a half ago, I actually bit the bullet and started my own fund, which is called
With a great name.
it's called Nazaré Ventures, which is named after the big wave because we're investing. It's a cliche, but we're investing in big waves of innovation.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about Nazaré, as you all know as a surfer, is that it's actually not a surf spot.
Yeah.
So year round, you wouldn't go to Nazaré. You might go like on your boogie board, but you don't go surf there because it's not actually a great wave. There's other great waves nearby, but once a year at various times, this thing kicks off the largest surfable wave in the world. So essentially, that's sort of a metaphor for what we're trying to invest in.
There were good waves this year, regular waves as well, but it is not typically a regular surf spot. Yeah.
So yeah, so the fund is focused on essentially investing in the next wave of AI infrastructure meaning software infrastructure. So we believe that there's going to be a new way of building AI applications and a new kind of infrastructure. Some of it will be crypto related and decentralized, and some of it will just be investing in better models and using some of the things we've seen recently with the DeepSeek model from China. So.
Give us a little bit of background. How do you see these waves, particularly in Web3 and crypto? You saw this, from almost from the get-go. We had, initial excitement and then down and then further excitement. I mean, It's been a few cycles. How do you look at that from an historic perspective?
Well, more recently, it's become macro correlated, and people are starting to understand that crypto is considered a risk asset. It's not really, I guess it's sort of like short-term macro risk correlated and then long-term potentially decorrelated from other assets. But the long term is a long term. You have to look on a long term time scale. And if you look at Bitcoin, that's really what it's done. It's kind of correlated locally with macro risk on, and then over time has decorrelated from the different assets.
But did it follow the normal hype patterns, and it followed like the product development around the crypto ecosystem, or is it just really hype in your view over the years?
Well, I think of it as now as it's like hyper capitalization. And there's been periods where we've thought that, especially during the build out of Ethereum, that crypto is more like this community social good, almost like almost like a socialist kind of model. But over time, I've realized that this thing is just hyper capital, and especially with the recent trend in meme coins, and the new president had one too, and his wife, I think the son too. But we're sort of realizing that it's kind of like, can you tokenize anything and build anything into something that you can trade? And if there's a market for that, there's a market for that, and you trade it.
But the tokenization itself is taking way longer than people expected, right?
Of real world assets, yes. I think
real world barriers.
So there's a whole bunch of things here going on. So crypto itself is in some sense like crypto is the product, right? So like the people talked about like there's no product market fit, etc. Well, the product market fit for Bitcoin is very simple. It's like it's digital gold. You store it, it's that.
It appreciates.
Right.
It appreciates, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, it is an asset which is something that it feels like gold. It has properties where it's hard to seize. So that is the use case, essentially, if you think about what the reason why it was invented. And then with Ethereum, the initial use case for Ethereum was to do ICOs, essentially to raise capital. There's a decentralized mechanism for raising capital, and that's good and bad. So there's good ideas and bad ideas, mostly bad ideas. But a few good ideas, just like venture capital, it's like anything, right? At the end, Steve Jobs talked about this in terms of like the edge of a space, the edge of an industry is always the weirdest. It's where the best ideas are. It's where the worst ideas are. It's where the best people are. It's where the craziest are. It's where the scammers are, that you find them on that edge. So you have to kind of be somewhat, crypto is just really like it's like crypto's kind of become the internet, like the internet money. It has become this thing where the good and the bad are there, right? I also think that this particular cycle, and that there are other factors here happening here which are somewhat surprising in terms of the US government now and the administration now softening that stance. But even before that, there are these periods that I've noticed outside of crypto. For example, the introduction of social, the introduction of mobile and mobile social, mobile video, and YouTube. These kind of different moments which for a long time, people talked about, and they would have, Bill Gates had these, talking about these different ideas of how the internet was going to interact with your life and so on, yet they kind of missed most of it. And for a long time, we were like, hey, social network's going to happen, social network's going to happen. And then we had Friendster, and then we had MySpace, and then we were like, yeah, whatever, it's not going to happen. And then there's a Google version, and then all of a sudden Facebook just killed it. And looking back at that, it's hard to remember a time when that wasn't that. Looking back on time, it's hard to remember a time when we didn't have mobile phones that knew your location, that was applications.
But it's not even 20 years ago.
Yeah. And I think that, yes, exactly. And I think that this build out of the infrastructure and also the understanding of crypto and the acceptance of it by more and more people, and almost like these things, I call these things generational changes, in the sense that we kind of have to grow up with them enough to have enough of those that are like, respectable and like, but yet still do crypto, right? Because 13 years ago, like you were just crazy, right? Whereas now it's like, okay, I kind of get that. That's one of those things. Now it's just like, it's a technology that we use. And that's why I think that this period will be the one where we will all of a sudden move to this point where when we look back on it, we're like, well, of course that was going to happen.
Of
right?
course. It just became normal.
Yeah. And I think this
Standard.
one of the surprising ones recently has been stablecoins. So it's no longer like, oh, I'm going to try and get people in Nigeria or other parts of Africa to use crypto in terms of Bitcoin or Ethereum. Just take stablecoins and store that. And that's better than holding your own currency. And that, I think, is like this aha moment, and then realizing these rails are much easier to build. And that is suddenly becoming the very strong driver. Yeah, normalization. Yeah.
But it takes, of course, it always takes a few years and experiments and different products until you hit the sort of mainstream, which is where we're heading in crypto for sure. And how does this combine with AI? Where do both things meet in your view?
Yeah, I had that question a lot, especially since I started the fund and started working on it. It's like the intersection question, like what is the intersection? And so there's one way of looking at this, which is that big AI is bad, right? So we look at this, I say Facebook's bad and Google's bad and OpenAI is really bad. So you get into that narrative, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to do this crypto AI thing to save the world, right?
A time will come where DeepSeek is super bad.
Yeah, everything's bad. And I think that's interesting. It's an interesting narrative, and it's got some people some good speaking opportunities and maybe help them raise some money. I'm much more focused, especially after 13 years in crypto, of like, what is the application? What is going to be the thing that makes it an economically better situation? And I think that a democratized environment for AI, where it's much easier to build applications, it's much easier to build infrastructure, it's easier to train models, because we have open source software and we have hardware and software that's cheap to use. So I call this, with reference, make AI cheap again, or matcha. Essentially, like, why is it so expensive to build these things? Why does it take $3 billion to build a frontier model? And DeepSeek recently has shown that, perhaps you can do this for less. Controversial as to what exactly it is.
Right.
Perhaps, I'm not sure.
Check if this.
That's a long story. It's another podcast. The trend of like using commodity hardware versus specialized hardware that happened at Sun when I was there, and that trend does kick in. And I think that's going to happen around NVIDIA too. NVIDIA may be the beneficiary of that, but still, I think the highest end chips will be mostly for the very, very powerful supercomputers and not for everything. So that's where the idea with crypto comes in, is like, well, maybe you can build these things in a decentralized way. Maybe you can incentivize the participants in these systems to do incentivized training, incentivized data generation, inference that's happening on networks that are disparate around the world or provided by multiple different kinds of people. Agents that interoperate with one another and perhaps are not on the same rails, for example, but using Trojanless rails. So these are sort of the general broad idea. Those things all require things like zero knowledge proofs, fully homomorphic encryption, coordination frameworks, and things that, that's essentially a lot of the areas we're looking at investing in the infrastructure that allows us to build this. Just like with crypto, it took a while to get that infrastructure in place, and then all of a sudden it is.
How do you see things moving forward? Number one, let's go back to the Lisbon thing.
Yeah.
Why did you choose Lisbon, and were you kind of surprised?
Came for the waves.
Right. Good spot. Cold water, but good waves.
I mean, it's a funny thing. Like I go visit countries where people live and it snows, and I'm like, that's so cute. You have cold weather in the winter. So 25 years in one place, which is extremely moderate climate, after growing up in the UK, I was going to choose a moderate climate. And, I moved here, my two teenage kids, and like we wanted to kind of keep something somewhat similar. Great international school system, and at the time, like, a number of people we knew from California and other countries moving here. Good friend of mine, Premier from Libertas, moved from London. We had a lot of people moving. It was a little bit before the big influx of crypto.
Yeah,
Uh,
investors and enthusiasts.
yeah, DJs. I mean, friends, many friends now. But that was really the thing. It was also very welcoming, and very easy to kind of onboard. And people like you made it easy to really adapt quickly. And yeah, I've been very happy here. So
That's good. That's good. And so, how do you see things moving forward now with this administration? Are we really going to see, a glory day of IPOs and crypto exploding and normalizing and AI and the whole bright future?
yeah,
Or are we gonna have like a tariff war and the whole world will come down and there'll be wars and famine?
I think it's going to be.
Bit of both.
Have you read the three body problem? Okay, so three body problem talks about like a planet which is surrounded by three stars, which is chaotic, right? And there's periods of stability and there's periods of chaos. I think we're entering a chaotic era.
Right.
I could not predict exactly how this is going to play out. If you kind of follow the trend of hypercapitalization, I think that's where it goes. There's good and bad in that.
I'm sure it has everything.
Whereas the US certainly seems to be running an experiment of what happens if you really let libertarian theory just run its course.
And this is starting that road, right?
Yep, it's on that course, it's on that road. We may have another 12 years of this. It may be a short experiment and fast. I don't know. Politically, my biggest concerns are the foreign policy. I think that the trend towards trying to make government more efficient is generally a good idea.
Maybe the way it's being done is a bit weird.
I think that startups, like I'm very good at running startups and small things, and not so good at running big things, and I certainly wouldn't run a massive thing.
Yeah,
And
governments
are
are
massive.
massive. It is not a startup. And you think we're entering, like, for example, in space technology?
Mm-hmm.
I know it's not your specifically a thing, but you were contracted to NASA. So
Yeah.
how do you see things moving forward? I think there's going to be a big leap forward. Or we're just going to normalize sending rockets up and down, but not really
I think that
landing in other planets.
independent of the political conversation, I think that the acceleration that we're going to get in so many parts of engineering and technology and science from the use of these intelligent models, I really think it's very hard to predict, and it will be dramatic.
Dramatic change.
Dramatic changes, and in some sense, the next couple of decades is really determined by how society reacts to these.
And tell me something. You are an entrepreneur. You are also an investor. What are the big if you had to sort of advise young entrepreneurs on what they should and shouldn't do? Do you have some sort of thoughts that you want to share
Go find something hard. Go find a hard problem
to solve?
Yeah.
Otherwise, everybody else has solved it.
Yeah, and also that's so something that's hard and you find interesting because you're going to want to work on it. Something that fascinates you. There's this whole thing of do the thing you love. Like work isn't always something you love. Like there's always things you don't love about it. But doing something hard and significant,
Challenge yourself. Right?
Yeah, those are things, and those are things that when I've done them, have always felt best, and has always given me a reason to get up in the morning. That's what you want.
Even if things go wrong now and again.
Yeah, and also either find good partner you really want to work with, or just do it yourself. And don't wait.
That's a good advice. Stephen, it was great to see you.
Thank you.
Great to have you at Indico.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.